So glad you're here. I'm looking out at the group, and I'm making a very astute observation. I just noticed this, by the way. No one in this room, yeah, no, I'm right. No one in this room has a tie on. I'm the only one with a tie on, right? So let's start things off on the right foot. Can I take this stupid thing off? Is that okay with you? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for that. I haven't done much to deserve it, but thank you. And there we go. Okay, so the tie's off. Let's get rid of the jacket, too. What do you think? Huh? We're stopping there. No, we're stopping. We're done. We're done. Trust me. You don't want any more, neither do I. We're good right here. I've got some fun stuff to talk to you about today, and I know that you've been steeped in a conversation about technology, and my DNA is woven with technology. I began my career, I was talking to someone just a few minutes ago, coding in assembler, so I understand what's going on behind the scenes. But what fascinates me is what's going on in front of the technology. It's that human element, that cultural element, that social element that is so disruptive and so radically changing the way that we look at the world. And the way we look at the world, I think, is fundamentally the most important thing that you need to understand to do your job, to serve your enterprise, to serve your customers, to serve your clients. So let me ask you a question, right off the top, and be honest with me. You know, we know this is Vegas. It stays here. It's not going anywhere. How many of you, at the age of 12, said to yourself, I want to grow up and I want to be an IT professional? How many? Anybody? I got one hand going up. 2, 3. It was a rough childhood, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm right there with you. Being geek back then was not chic. Am I correct? I mean, today kids like to be geek. Back then, being geek was not at all chic. What did the rest of you want to be? Someone shouted out. What did you want to be when you were 12? You had no idea. Yeah, neither did I. You're 12 years old. Seriously? I mean, come on. Did anyone have an ambition at 12 years old to grow up and be something? Teacher, yeah. What else? You know what? That's exactly what I wanted to be, an astronaut. Because I grew up with the Apollo generation, right? Watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. That is my one big regret in life, is that I never, am going to have that opportunity. Maybe I will. Maybe through space tourism I will. We didn't want to be in this space, but here you are, and I've got a very basic assumption that I'm going to proceed with, if it's okay with you. You tell me if it's not. But the folks we have in this room, the 800, 1,000 people that will be in this room this morning, you are the 1,000 most important people in this industry right now. Because you know why? Because you're building it. You're the ones making the decisions around how this technology is going to impact not just the enterprise, but society. That seed you plant in the enterprise, that seed you plant in the consumer, that becomes the social norm. And it creates behaviors that are so wildly aberrant that we can't even begin to truly understand and appreciate, I think, many of these behaviors. But we will over time. So tell me, how many of you believe that everything great has already been invented? Anybody? Raise your hand. If all the good stuff's been invented, raise your hand right now. Of course you don't. None of us believe this. But what if I were to tell you that this is in fact the way we behave? We behave as though all the great stuff has already been invented. And we know that's not the case. So I wanted to be an astronaut, but I actually ended up in engineering school. And my dad was a big-time engineer. He had been an electrical engineer. So it's funny because recently Radio Shack went out of business, and now Sprint is taking them over as storefronts. I remember Radio Shack as the place my dad and I would go. This was our big adventure on the weekends. We'd go to Radio Shack to test out the tubes in our TVs. That was the big father-son thing we used to do. We'd take the tubes out of the TV, we'd go to Radio Shack and test it on the tester board. It was a fun childhood, it really was. Doesn't sound as good as it. It was fun. So I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build stuff. I got into the wonder of engineering, but I didn't want to build small stuff. Dad was into computers and electrical stuff. He worked at Honeywell. He worked at DEC. He used to bring home, I just thought of this in this minute actually, because someone was talking about big data with me this morning. He used to bring home Winchester disk drives. Anyone remember what those things were? They were the first portable disk drive, and they were about this big. They must have weighed 40 pounds or so. And they were called portable because you could actually put them into a car and move them to someplace other than the computer center. That, my friends, was big data, okay? That was big data. So off I go to engineering school, and my dad was very proud, and he said, this is fantastic, so what kind of engineer are you going to be? Computers, science, that's the big thing, Tom, that's where you should be going. I said, no. I want people to see the stuff that I make. People can't see what's in computers, and I want to build, like a bridge. How's that? A big, huge bridge. I'm going to go civil, Dad. I want to be a civil engineer. Anybody in the room, just out of curiosity, civil? A few of you. There's always a few, right? I had a great passion for this. There was something wonderful about building big things. My dad said to me, I'll never forget it because I had my acceptance letter right there. I showed it to him. And by the way, it was his alma mater. It was his alma mater. And just to put things in perspective for you, okay? My dad was a very accomplished person. My schooling was not quite as illustrious up until that point in time. But I got accepted to his alma mater, and for me that was huge. However, my last book, The Gen Z Effect, is my 10th book, which is a huge milestone for me, because that represents actually more books in total than I read through my entire academic career, okay? So Dad looks at me, and Dad says, Tom, I'm very proud of you, but I'll be honest. If you built a bridge, it would be a beautiful bridge, Tom. Lovely bridge. I just wouldn't want to be the first one to cross it. So off I go to engineering school, and I'm talking to you about how a perspective is formed. That's the point of this story, so bear with me. Off I go to engineering school. One of the first days, in the first days we're there, my friends and I, we all wanted to be civil engineers. We were in the College of Engineering. The dean gets up to talk about the importance of the perspective that an engineer brings to the world. And at one point during this rant, he says to us, look at the chairs that you are sitting on. What do they look like to you? And I thought, wow, this is deep. This is why I'm here. And I nudged my friend Sal, who I had lunch with last week. We were talking about this. I nudged my friend Sal. I said, Sal, it's a chair, right? It's like not a trick. He says, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a real chair. Dean goes on. He says, from now on, as engineers, you will never look at that chair in the same way again. In fact, and he picks one up, he raises it over his head, and he says, from now on, when you look at these chairs, you will not see 4 legs. What you will see as an engineer are 4 vectors of force. And I thought, shit. Maybe Dad was right. Because I don't want to see the vectors. I want to see the beauty. My perspective is of the design, the system. That's what I'm interested in. I don't want to see the vectors of force. 20 years later, it dawned on me that we all see vectors of force. We all build these disciplines through our careers, through our experiences that cause us to see the world in a very, very specific way. And nowhere is that more true than in technology, where we've been so conditioned over such a short period of time to believe that we have indeed created the apex of what technology can do. And we haven't. We've barely put in place the footings for what technology will do. We've laid what the foundation will be placed on top of. That's how early we are into this. To use a Las Vegas analogy, we're about 5 minutes into a 24-hour poker game, and yet we think all of our chips are on the table. They're not. So how do you change this perspective? How do you get this new view of the world that not just enlightens you, because it's neat to be enlightened, but more importantly helps you to take actions within your enterprise, with your customers, in your own career that will allow you to move forward with technology, to change that lens that you use to look at that world, that lens that shows you vectors. How do you change that? Because you're so attached to it, we all are, right? This is why we believe that we're at the apex of civilization. So how do we change that? Well, question for you. If you were to come up with one word, just one word, not a phrase, not a sentence, one word, that describes how we got to where we are today, it defines everything that we've done to create the society that we live in right now. Not just over the past 200 years, but let's say over the past 500 years. What would that one word be? Innovation, absolutely. What else? Imagination. Mobility. Transition. Happiness. What's that? Vision. All great words. But you know what? Every one of these words is predicated on us being able to do this. Let me help you out a little bit here. Let's say that I was asked the question a bit differently. Same word, is the word that will propel us into the future, that will solve all the great problems that today we're plagued with, whether they be problems dealing with healthcare and illnesses, or whether they be climate change, whatever it is, this word is the word that will allow us to deal with the future and to build it appropriately. Same word, what is it? Information, yeah. Yell it out loud, what else are you thinking of? People. Inspiration, curiosity, all of these also don't work if you don't have this in place. And guess what? This, which I'm going to show you in just a second, I'm on the edge of your seat any longer, this is what you do, which is why I say you are the most important people. Because everything that we take on, every challenge we overcome, we have overcome and we will overcome because of one fundamental reason. And it's because over the last 200 years and over the next 200 years, maybe the next 1,000 years, what will define civilization is our ability to connect. And I don't mean connectivity in the sense of just a network. I mean connectivity on a scale that we have yet to imagine. Connectivity that will blow your mind. And I want to begin by giving you a sense for the scale of this connectivity, because I think we have a tough time getting our minds around the tremendous sea change of hyperconnectivity that's going to occur. And it will be an internet of everything and everyone. We will all be part of it. Every object we touch, everything we breathe will somehow be connected to this. Hold that thought for a minute, because right now it sounds a bit absurd, but I'm going to show you the data and the evidence and the math behind this. This is not just dogma. So if we were to look over the past several decades, since 1960, the computer revolution, the technology revolution, the information revolution, the data revolution, the digitization revolution, now the datafication revolution, one thing is absolutely perfectly clear. This line that you're going to see that goes from the lower left to the upper right here is a logarithmic scale that indicates the increase in the number of computing devices over the course over the last 60 approximately years. Logarithmic, because if I was to define this on a linear scale, right, this line would go up to the clouds somewhere, into the stratosphere. Every decade, the number of computing devices has increased by one order of magnitude since 1960. So we've gone through these eras, right? The mainframe, the departmental computer, remember those? Departmental computers. The desktop computer, the PC, the laptop, the revolution in mobility, tablets, wearables. Today we have 10 billion computing devices globally, which is nothing. It sounds like a lot, but it's nothing. Let's say we were to take this line, because the math has worked pretty well for us over the last 60 years. This is like Moore's Law. I mean, it is a fundamental precept on which we will build hyperconnectivity. Let's say we were to move that forward. What would that look like in 2100? You would have 10 to the 20th, and actually we did the math again just a little while ago. We had one of our analysts go back and look at this and say it's actually probably closer to 10 to the 21st if you follow it, depending on exactly when you start that logarithmic line. So let's say 10 to the 20th. How big is that number? Give me an analogy. There are 10 to the 24th stars in the known universe. Yeah, that doesn't quite strike me as especially relevant. I don't hang out counting stars at night in the sky. I don't know about you. Let me give you a different number. That is 100 times as many grains of sand as there are on all the beaches of the world. Not all the deserts, but all the beaches of the world. Mind-boggling? Well, you know what? It would have been just as mind-boggling if I were to say to you in 1960 that you'll have 10 billion computing devices globally. That wouldn't have made any sense. How would I use them? How would I produce them? How would I manufacture them? How would they be affordable? You'd have great questions, all of which would lead you to a dead end that says there's no way that's going to happen. Don't put yourself in that same dead end. The perspective you have today that you use to look at technology is a perspective whose glass has been ground through the last 60 years. It is not the pattern of the future. The pattern of the past is not the pattern of the future. The pattern of the future will be such that robotics aren't robots that walk among us. We'll breathe them. They'll be in our bodies. They'll be in our food. They'll be in our medicines. Everything will be connected to some degree. And the question now becomes, what do you do with that connectivity? How do you use it? How does it inform you? How does it change your business model? How does it change your behavior? My son Adam, this is when he was probably about 13, he's 16 now. Hyper-connected, a kid looks like he's in the midst of NORAD. I mean, he can't have any less than 3 screens going at any one point in time. To Adam, it's all about the behavior. And it is to you as well, and I'll prove it to you, honest. How many of you, before even getting out of bed this morning, checked your mobile device for email, text, or any kind of messages? Raise your hands. Look around. Every one of us did. Would that have been aberrant behavior 5 years ago? 10 years ago? But today, it not only is typical, but it's necessary. Because behaviorally, to integrate with your piece of society, you have to look at it through that lens. You are hyper-connected. You're already giving up privacy and personal data. This is happening. We fight it, we push back on it. I understand that. I do as well. I'll give you an example of it in just a little bit. But it is the tide that we're all being carried by. More people today, by the way, sleep with their mobile devices than with their spouse. In some ways, you might say this is a more forgiving companion. And how many of you actually sleep with your mobile device on the pillow next to you? Raise your hand. See that? It's all the single guys raising their hands right now. I speak from experience. I'm going to blow your mind in about 30 seconds. We are part of a trend that we spend so little time thinking about and talking about, and this trend is the defining trend behind Generation Z. And it is why we are all, if we want to be by choice, part of Gen Z. Pay attention here. For 5,000 years, the population of the world has been expressed in the shape of a pyramid. And that pyramid defines the age groups of society globally. At the base, we have a large base. We have a lot of young people. At the top, we have very few old people. Simple construct. It has been the defining construct of demographics for the last 5,000 years. Pandemics, great wars have morphed this a little bit, but it always regresses to the mean of a pyramid. No more. We are going to see what is perhaps the single greatest change in the demographics of humanity that has ever been experienced throughout the entirety of civilization. Watch me roll the clock forward from 1950. What you see now are the bands, the 5-year age bands that represent population. What you see as the pyramid grows and the bridging outwards is the growth in population from today 7 billion to 10 billion. Right now, 2020, notice that we have more of a dome shape than we have a pyramid. As we approach 2100, and this is global, this is not US. This is not the developed world. This is not the G7. This is globally. There will not be a single geography that you can point to or carve out on the face of the planet that by 2100 will not have this shape of a skyscraper, where every 5-year age band from birth up through age 65 is within a single percentage point of every other band in terms of the number of people that inhabit that band of population. We have never seen that. And guess what? These folks will all be connected, potentially. The affordability of connectivity, their ability to be part of a social economic system that is truly global, their ability to contribute value and to extract value from this system will create opportunities we can't even begin to think about, because today, generously, 2 billion people are connected. Generously. I think we're probably closer to 1 billion. We give ourselves too much credit. But that leaves 5 billion that aren't connected at all. And yet, we have 7 billion enabled mobile devices on cellular systems. The math doesn't work. Do you see how we're at this juncture, this incredible intersection of humanity and technology? They will all have the opportunity to be educated. My son is 16 now. He's gone through dozens of MIT courses, loves taking the MIT courses. He said to me at one point, he said, Dad, if I take all these courses, do I still have to go to school? Can I just get the degree? It's a good question, isn't it? He's going to show up on day one having taken all the courses. What are you going to teach him? Sure, I get, you want to go to a good school, you want the great network, there are professors that will impassion you. I understand all of that. That's not going away. But can you not be impassioned through a MOOC? Can you not be impassioned through a much larger social network that supports your dreams and ambitions in ways that a small classroom never could have? Good questions, right? This is the reversal of not just a trend, it is the reversal of a societal set of behaviors, expectations, understandings that I think we need to seriously consider as we think about the impact of hyperconnectivity. And we will not go into this future the way we went into it over the last 60 years. The last 60 years was an enormously arduous process for all of us, right? Because you lived this. You don't go into the future by going from the present to the future. That never works. You bounce right off of this hard stop and you come right back to the present. The example is all around us. I remember, I've got my iPhone here, but I remember my Newton. Remember the Newton, the first PDA? You cannot go directly into the future. You have to pave a path. And that's what we've done. Over the course of our lifetimes, we've gone through so many different generations of technology. We've been our own customer support. We've been our family's customer support, our friends' customer support. It was arduous, wasn't it? It was painful. But like any painful journey, don't you take pride in the fact that you went through that journey, that you climbed that mountain, that you now sit at that pinnacle and you understand technology? You take pride in that, don't you? And along comes your grandmother or your mother and whips out a tablet and ends up right in that same spot. And it really pisses you off because it took you 30 years to get there. You get what's going on in this tablet. She doesn't care. She just wants to Skype with her 2-year-old grandchild. And you look at this and you say, it shouldn't be that easy. That's slingshotting. That's what happens when the mass, the other 5 billion, all these people who swore off of desktops and PCs and laptops suddenly are thrust into the future. And the rest of us look at that and we say, it's just not right. No. It is the only way that's right, because this is the behavioral piece that we never get when we talk about technology. We don't get that this is the way it works, that it changes behavior. It doesn't just change the device. It changes us. Tell me what she's doing. Look at her quickly. What's she doing? Yeah, right. To her, a magazine is a defective iPad. And the proof, I love this, right? This last frame, her finger, and you've seen this with your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, nephews. She's pushing her finger into her thigh. Smart child. The deduction being, damn it, the finger's working. It's got to be the device. Am I right? These kids expect intelligence. It's an object. It should respond to me. It should be connected. It should have a behavior. And we're finally at that cusp where the separation between the technology and the person truly is starting to blur. And we've talked about this for so long. There is no longer a user interface. There should not be a user interface. What there should be is a user experience. If you're not calling it that, if that's not what you're creating, then what you're focusing on is the device, not the customer, not the user. It is about the experience, and the experience and the expectation around it is changing so radically. And look, let's be honest here, right? A lot of us, we are not going to go into this cold, dark night willingly. We just won't. It's going to happen. Some will be left behind. You know these folks. You work with them. I know that none of them are in this room. I understand that. But some of us are not going to go willingly. And look, full disclosure, it is so disruptive and uncomfortable for me to continue using every new technology. I'll buy an Apple Watch, not because right now I understand exactly how I would use it. In fact, I can think of all the reasons why I wouldn't use it, but because I want to feel that experience. I want to understand what the experience imparts to me beyond just the device. And we get this wrong over and over and over again. Remember Maxwell Smart? Oh, I love this. This is so beautiful. My daughter saw this a few years ago when I brought this magazine home. She said, why is he talking into his shoe? I said, well, what do you mean? It's funny. He's talking into a shoe. He's a secret agent. Well, why isn't it funny? He could just use a cell phone, couldn't he? I said, no. This is what we thought cell phones would look like. And by the way, do you see that? It's a rotary dial shoe phone, okay? We're really bad at figuring out the future. We're good at the technology. We get the technology piece of it. So when the Motorola Brick first came out, 1980s, take you back in time a little bit. How many of you owned one of these, Motorola Brick? I did, right? $3,000. You were so proud to have it. It was like a World War II walkie-talkie radio, basically, just repackaged in plastic. But the pride of ownership was intense, right? You wanted people to know that you had one of these things. You could have probably only talked to 1 or 2 other people at the time, but nonetheless, you had it. At that time, what did the pundits say? The most astute technology observers and predictors, what did they say the number of cell phones in use by the year 2000 would be? Anyone want to take a guess? Total number, not just Motorola, total number of cell phones by year 2000. 10,000, someone said. It's a little higher than that, a little higher. 10 million was the consensus. There was one outlier at 100 million, but the consensus was at about 10 million. How many cell phones did I say are enabled today? 7 billion? Okay, come on, that's not a rounding error, guys. That's not just a math problem. Right? It's a fundamental inability to understand the behavior. We get the technology. We know Moore's law. I just showed you the trajectory of computing devices. We get all that. We understand what the costs will be, the storages, the feeds, the bandwidth. We know all of this. 5, 10 years out, we get it. But we can't predict behavior even 5 or 10 years out. Want to believe that? Watch this. Think to yourself, when did this commercial air? What year?
Have you ever borrowed a book?
And everything you see here is exactly what you do today, right? E-books, we all use e-books. GPS, we all use GPS. The similarity between what we have today and what this commercial portrayed is uncanny. So what year was this? Using tablets. Sending a fax on the beach was the term that AT&T used, right? Using the technology of the past to describe the future. Electronic medical records, all here. What year was it?
So this is where we stand on the...
I hear 90, I heard 70. No, it wasn't 70. I think someone said 80. WebEx.
Have you ever watched the movie
Netflix. My God, this is, how prescient can you be? 1993.
The company that'll bring it to you.
That was not that long ago. 20 years. And here's the punchline. AT&T understood with immense precision exactly what the future would look like. And yet AT&T did not bring a single one of these technologies to market. Not one. How does that happen? How do you get the future that right and not be able to take advantage of it? Because what we get is technology. What we don't get is behavior. My daughter at 16 had her first boyfriend, Ryan. What a wonderful man. Truly, as a father, you know, your daughter's first boyfriend is always this tremendous, surrounded by fear, doubt, uncertainty, and all kinds of other unpleasant thoughts. But Ryan was wonderful. Ryan was wonderful. There was one flaw in the relationship that really bugged me, though. I tried to live through it. But Ryan moved in with us for a whole year. He lived with us in our home for an entire year on Skype. I'd walk into Mia's room. Hey, Mia, can I come in? Sure, Dad. Oh, there's Ryan on the yacht. Hey, Ryan, how are you? Hey, Mr. K, how you doing? Non-stop. At night, they'd leave the laptops open so they could, hard for a father to say for a 16-year-old daughter, so they could sleep with each other. I'd hear Ryan snoring some nights. Is this weird? Is it strange? But yet we sleep with our mobile devices. The pattern of the past is not the pattern of the future. Not when things are changing as quickly as they are in the space that we inhabit. And you want to see how fast we adapt to patterns? Don't take your eyes off the screen. Think to yourself, in which direction is this girl spinning? Clockwise or counterclockwise? I know some of you right now are having a tough time because you see her spinning in either direction. Hold on a second. Make it easier for you. What I want you to do is look at both girls. Can anyone make the girl on the left go clockwise and the one on the right go counterclockwise? Anyone? Can anyone do that simultaneously? So how many of you right now see the girls, both girls spinning counterclockwise? Show of hands. How many see her spinning clockwise? Show of hands. Right down the middle. Wow, amazing, isn't it? So how can you both be right? You know what? There is no inherent spin. So allow your rational intellectual brain to absorb the following fact. What you are seeing here are silhouettes that look exactly the same from the front or the back. So if you see my arms in front of one in front of the other, you know my right arm's in front of my left because it's not a silhouette. You can see the three-dimensional aspect of this. You can't see that there. The same silhouette from the front or the back. You have chosen the direction of spin. Your rational mind now knows that. What I want you to do is consciously, at will, change the direction of spin from clockwise to counterclockwise or from counterclockwise to clockwise. How many people at will can do that? 15% maybe of the hands going up. What's wrong with the rest of us? Why can't we change it? What's going on? What you have up here is the most brilliant and amazing pattern matching engine ever created. You are wired to not only see patterns, but to then adapt to them. And as you adapt to them, to reinforce them. And it becomes this wonderful loop. The more you believe that's the pattern, the more you execute on that pattern. And not to get too deep, but this is what we, in our lives, in our professions, this is what patterns do to us. We reinforce them and we continue them. And by doing so, we satisfy ourselves that, in fact, our choice of the pattern is the correct choice. It's exactly what we do in our enterprises. It's why billion-dollar organizations can be disrupted by two kids in a dorm room. It's why innovation always has an opportunity to flourish. Because the pattern becomes so incredibly ingrained in our minds, in our organizations, that we don't want to leave it. And what's absolutely hilarious right now is that most of you haven't heard a single freaking word I said because you're still looking at her trying to change the way she's spinning. Am I right? Am I right? It's like, who the hell is he? What's he doing up there? Just, can you shut up for a minute? I'm trying to do this. Let me do this thing. I could give some of you hours and it still wouldn't, because the more brilliant you are, the more you attach yourself to that pattern, the more you reinforce it. And that ends up being our nemesis, is we believe the patterns of the past will be the patterns of the future, and it just doesn't work out that way. We are entering what I think is the most magnificent age, so far certainly, in information technology. It is the age of datafication. It is where we connect all this and we create meaning through it. It is where analytics, where big data, where all this stuff we talk about finally plays a real role in shaping the enterprises that we live in and the systems that we build and the behaviors that we adopt. But let me give you a framework to better understand this, because we've gone through 4 different eras and derivatives of innovation itself, and we're entering now an era that I think is fascinating because it begins to take the human element to some degree out of innovation. Here's what I mean. The first derivative of innovation is that derivative when it's all about the device. Think of the first iPad. Right? Or the first iPod, for that matter. It's all about the device. What was the killer app for the iPad for the first 2-3 years? Angry Birds. Absolutely. Right? Can you imagine what a waste of a technology? For 3 years, the only purpose we saw for this thing was Angry Birds. Right? We don't get it. It's all about the device. Then we start to add some data to it. Adding iTunes. And as you add that, you start to capture some behavioral information. And now it becomes more about not just the digitization of the data, but the datafication of the experience. That's the third derivative, right? And that leads to the fourth derivative, which is really not about the device at all. It is about how you take the behavior and create a personalized, predictive experience. It is my genius mix. It is Pandora. It is the thing that understands me better than I understand myself. I cannot express my preferences as well as it can for me. We are entering, with that fourth derivative, this era of autonomic innovation, where innovation begins to happen by itself. Companies like i2Open are already creating these digital control towers that will look over industries, change the supply chain, instantaneously based on what the market needs. No human being making a decision about that. Market seems to need this, will instantaneously predict what they're going to need tomorrow and change the supply chain to be able to deliver that. That's fourth derivative innovation, and it's based on behavior. It's all about trading behavior. What is the single most valuable commodity that anyone can own today? What is it? It's not gold. It's not a precious metal. What is it? It's you and me. It's our behavior. And we're giving it away. Have you noticed? Anybody use realage.com? So go to RealAge, look up realage.com. It's now a Dr. Oz property, or he's associated with it. And what it allows you to do is to get online and figure out what your real age is. Not your chronological age, but your real age, which is kind of cool, right? I'm 57. I got on this when I think I was 56 when I first became aware of it. I was shooting for like 46. That'd be cool. So you enter in a bunch of data about yourself, and it'll tell you how old you really are, not how old you are chronologically. Who doesn't want to be younger than they are chronologically, right? So it begins pretty, non-invasively. What are your habits? How often do you work out? Are you sedentary? Do you walk? Do you run? How often do you sit? Then it goes to dietary habits. What do you eat? How many vegetables, fruits, greens, so on and so forth. Then it gets a bit more invasive. And I'm doing this because I want to get to 46, right? I'm gaming the system. I'm going to get to 46. What kind of meds do you take? Do you take aspirins? Do you take anti-inflammatories? Then what kind of prescription drugs do you take? Okay, I'm entering this stuff. I'm cool with it. And this goes on for a while, and finally you realize, you know what, I haven't even told my doc this stuff, but I'm telling realage.com. And one question put me over the edge. It said, how many times a week do you make whoopee? And my first reaction was, weekly? Seriously? Like that's the only frequency? Who has time? Who has time? And you could be a bit more sympathetic than that, but that's okay. I'm sitting here in front of you just kind of sharing myself. You can do with it what you will. Why do we do this? It occurred to me, I can't hit the delete button. I can't purge myself from this thing. I am in the cloud. This thing knows more about me than my physician knows about me right now. And I can't extricate myself from it. And whether it's in that sort of a one fell swoop approach, or whether it's in small bits and bites, we are giving up who we are. We are giving up our privacy. We are telling Google through the content of our emails exactly what's important to us and what's relevant to us at the deepest levels of our psyche in ways that we don't even understand. And empirically, this information is out there now. And the behavioral data is the data everyone wants. Social conversation here that we have just barely started to touch the surface of, right? Just barely started to touch the surface of. And there's so many apps that we're starting to see today whose sole purpose is to track what you do and how you do it. And this becomes the device that understands you better than anyone else, including yourself. The last of these forces, these great six forces that are driving Gen Z, that are driving the behaviors of these, not just the kids born since 1995, but all of our behaviors, because we're all Gen Z. We all use the same platforms, the same technologies, right? None of us are immune from any of what I've talked to. We're all in the thick of it right now. We are all Gen Z. Is this notion of life hacking. My son, when he learned to play with Legos, he began by playing with LegoFactory.com. Loved it. Very, very cool experience. He'd build his own Lego toy. But you know what was really cool to him was not the build. It was the sharing. It was the socialization. He created his own servers and asked his friends to come play with him on the servers. It was so cool to see him doing this. And the experience was a social one. It wasn't a technology one. He did the same with Minecraft. When Minecraft first started to take off, if you have kids or you live with kids or you have nieces, nephews, grandkids, Minecraft was a huge social phenomenon that ended up being acquired by Microsoft ultimately. And Adam would build a server. And by the way, the first time I found out he was building servers was when I found out he had hacked my Verizon firewall at home to build a server on one of my computers. Adam, how'd you do this? YouTube. To Adam, if it's not on YouTube, it's not worth doing. Right? Nothing comes with a user's manual. Life's user's manual is YouTube. And he'll spend hours on this. Days sometimes. This becomes his life. This becomes, I'll give you his term for it. One day he was in the attic for hours and hours and hours, and I finally said to him, Adam, you got to get off the computer. You got to stop gaming, go outside, have some fun, be with your friends, do something, get some vitamin D. The sun is shining, get some vitamin D. And he said to me, Dad, what did you do? When you were my age, what did you do for fun? I said I'd get on my Stingray banana seat bike and I'd go out and play with my friends till, your grandmother called me home for dinner. He said, oh, really? So you played like on your dead-end street? I said, yeah, you called a cul-de-sac. I used to call it a dead-end street. He said, you know what, Dad? This right here, pointing to his computer, this, Dad, is my cul-de-sac. I thought, whoa, that's pretty cool, Adam. Now get the hell outside and get some vitamin D and get some sunshine. I haven't got the parenting thing figured out either, because for them, this is their life. This becomes how they experience the world. So to tell them to get a life is completely incongruent with what they already have. This is my life. This is where my friends are. This is my cul-de-sac. This is where I live. And I will do anything I need to do on that cul-de-sac to get through all of the impediments that stand in my way. One of the kids, and I say kid because he's a 15-year-old, we interviewed for the Gen Z Effect for the book, Suman Mohammadi, built On a 3D printer, one of the greatest life hacks is 3D printing. Print on a 3D printer a stethoscope that is a case for the iPhone that literally replaces, it can record heart sounds, low heart murmurs, replaces over $500,000 worth of medical equipment with a 3D printed iPhone case. Another one of the kids that we profiled, Easton LaChapelle, built a prosthetic limb using 3D printing that costs a few $100s, whereas the same limb with the same functionality and as it stands right now, less functionality, will cost $80,000. It's built to suit for the user. What these kids do, what Gen Z's ethos is all about is, I don't care what the impediments are. I'm going to hack that system and I'm going to get to the purpose that drives me because I have the tools with which to do that. They don't believe in IP. They don't believe in protecting IP. It should be open because that's the way innovation is fostered. These are the behaviors that you will have to learn to live with, whether you like them or not, whether I care for them or not. And it's going to change the whole notion of wealth distribution. It's going to change the way we look at the world. Today, if you take the whole population of the world and put it into a pyramid, half of that pyramid, 3.5 billion people, the half that is the poorest of all of us, would have the same degree of wealth as the 85 people that fit into a child's sand pail in comparison, in the scale comparison, to the Great Pyramid of Giza. How do you change that wealth disparity? You don't change it by creating a different sort of currency. It's not about Bitcoin. It's about moving from affluence to influence. What Adam is doing with this social network on his cul-de-sac is he's creating a form of social influence that will balance the scales. It is a new currency of affluence. And they're using it, these kids are using it that way. They understand what it means to wield influence. And they're doing it because they're getting smarter. We've got a 2 billion strong cohort in Gen Z. Those 2 billion kids are going to alter the world because they'll all be educated. But the other 6, 7, 8 billion will also be educated. In the next 20 years, we will graduate more kids than we have in the entire history of mankind through MOOCs. And it's not going to be a solo flight. These kids will collaborate intensely because they don't know how to do it any other way. Like Mia and Ryan, they're always together. They're never off. They're never disconnected. And it's not just a short-term phenomenon. It's not just because of Twitter and Facebook. It is because of all of the things that have been happening over the last 100 years. If you look at the Nobel Prize, we've moved from giving it to individuals to giving it to teams. It'll be just teams going forward. Not because the problems are more complex, they are, but because we don't know how to work any other way. And it will work longer. The collaboration will be across generations. We will live longer, but we'll also work longer. And by 2100, we will be working after we're dead. You think it's funny, but look at your Facebook page. How many dead friends do you have on Facebook? And they're still there. You still post their pages. Someday one dead friend will post another dead friend's page. That'll be really freaky. Right? This is the world that we live in. Let me leave you with one final image, right? And it is the image that you need to carry as your mantle. Because this ultimately is what allows us to recognize behavior, to change it, and to build the future. To build those bridges into tomorrow. Remember this scene from the Titanic? They see the iceberg. You know what's cool is they did everything right at that moment, from that moment on. The problem was before that moment, right? The slag used for the rivets was not of the right quality and purity, and therefore the rivets came apart much easier than they should have. Perhaps the bulkhead should have been a little bit higher, and less arrogance should have been put into building the boat, and the number of lifeboats that were on the Titanic. Yeah, okay, all of that is true as well. Maybe the meteorological conditions weren't in their favor. They didn't see the iceberg quickly enough. But even given all that, they could have changed their fate, but they sealed it. Right at this moment, this critical second where the chief engineer says, right there, stop the engines, reverse the screws, put her into full astern. Worst possible thing you could have done, not the right behavior. This ship had 3 screws. You could have oscillated them. You could have pivoted. You could have, amazingly enough, diverted the ship around the Titanic just through that motion alone, but they didn't. They used an old behavior. But you know what? Forget it. Don't worry about any of that. Don't worry about it. The lesson I want you to take away is not how the Titanic worked. The lesson I want you to take away is the look on the eyes of the first officer. You see that look of fear, uncertainty, and doubt? If you ever see this look in the eyes of leadership, get the hell off the boat. Please. None of this happens without leadership. Who said it? Who said everything great can and has been invented? Charles Dill, Commissioner of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, 1899. Supreme arrogance. We don't believe it, but we behave it. change behavior, you change the world. That's your task. That's your mantle. Welcome to Gen Z. Thank you.